and welcome back to the Obsession Workshop series with me, Demis Helen. In this episode, we're going to take a look at creating a thick, gnarly bass in Obsession, and I'm going to show you a few simple techniques that I use to achieve this final result. So let's jump in and have a listen to what that sounds like. So there we are, we've just played a section there showing you the bass and then the bass in context, and it sounds pretty nice. It's got a really nice thick texture to it and a lot of grit, and it's very, very simple to create this. So moving along to this bass track here, this is my duplication of the bass track. And this, if we just solo this so we can hear that, is a new instance of Obsession. And that sounds like this at this moment. So to start with, on the sound design, I'm going to turn off Oscillator 2 input on the filter, and that's just going to let us hear Oscillator 1, just a single saw. But I want the second oscillator there, but we have the option to sort of like half depress this, and you can see the LED's not as bright, and it's just giving us a lower level from Oscillator 2. I'm also going to mute all of the voices down here, so we just have the one voice, and it's just going to sort of keep it more in a bass territory. We don't need those other voices there. And with that, we have our two voices set up, and I want to put the first oscillator 1 octave lower. And as you can see, we're already at 0. We can't go any lower than 0, but we can if we jump to the reverse side and use our mod matrix. So I'm going to turn all of these off so we've got a clean slate. And I'm going to set a constant value on the source, and I'm going to connect that to the oscillator 1 semitone. And essentially what I'm doing here is setting a constant value so it won't change unless I change it with that amount dial. And I'm going to dial this down 1 octave. And we're instantly set into bass territory. If you didn't want to reduce that, for example, you could just lower the MIDI position, or you could lower both oscillators at the same time with a constant value. But I want that split between the two. So after that, we want to sort of set up the basics for the filter. Now the filter works differently, so I will just quickly go over this. This is an envelope with a full sustain. So if you did this with the loudness or the main amp envelope, you're just going to get that constant sound till you let go of the key. And that's happening with the filter. So if we turn the filter down to 0, technically that should make a cutoff. But it's not, and that is because our filter envelope amount here is set to maximum on the sustain. So if we actually turn this down, so no envelope amount is being applied, this shape doesn't matter anymore, and it will just create a nice classic filter. But we want it to have a little bit of shape on there. So I'm going to set the envelope amount up a little bit, and I'm going to turn down the sustain and tune the decay. So I want the decay to be quite long, maybe sort of roughly near a second, but I want it to fit with the tempo of the track. So it might be different for you if you're following along with a different track. So a bit longer. Okay, so now that we've got that done, I'm going to turn the frequency up so we can hear the texture of this for the next part. And you'd think we'd jump to the Unison engine, and we can make a mix of these two if we wanted to, but I'm not going to use the Unison engine for this one. I'm going to use a more classic way. So the detune, just to show you what this does. Gives you much more sort of like drum and bass, Reese sort of sound. That's why I'm leaving that for now and the Unison engine out of this. But if we turn on the effects panel and then jump to the reverse side, and I'm going to turn off the effects, And what we're going to do is start with the chorus, but I want to make sure that I can hear this in its entirety from start to finish, so you can hear exactly how I am designing this sound as well. So we're going to hear the initial sound, then the chorus, and then I'll shape this up and I'll just quickly go over what I'm doing. So what happened here is play the start signal, activated the chorus, and then the ensemble to give it a much thicker and grittier texture, and it just simulates more voices. Turn the rate down to a similar speed in which the oscillators are phasing naturally, so it sort of becomes less obvious in that sense. And then the low and the high cuts are just rolling out the highs and the lows. But if you go too far with the highs, you can hear there's a bit of mushiness in there. And then the depth, I think I'm just going to dial this back a little bit, but left it up so we can hear how that sort of high cut, you could use it technically as a second filter if you wanted to. Gives you a much nicer texture. You still retain the grit, but you get a bit of a smoothness over the sound, and that's what I'm looking for this track. So next up is the reverb. So I'm going to put the active on, and I'm just going to shape this up, and you can just follow along. It's sort of self-explanatory. I am going to reduce the width because I want it just a little bit narrower, just because it's a bass and I don't want the reverb full width. And I'm not using the regen or shimmer in this one. So you can see with the reverb, I'm just using it as a blending tool. I'm not trying to hear it. I'm not trying to feel that reverb in the sound design, just as sort of a blanket blending option. So short reverb, so it's not overlapping too much into the next notes because it is a bass. The color, didn't want to chop too much high or low off, so I've just sort of gone down the middle. The width has been reduced. If you reduce that to 0, it's going to be in mono, essentially. That goes for the delay as well. And then I turned down that dry wet once I could hear what I was doing to the sound and just blended it nicely. So I'm going to do the same for the delay, and then I'm just going to show you 2 final tricks that I'm going to use for this so I have a little bit more control over the sound. So with the delay, I'm going to turn down to half, and then I'm going to tune this up. So with the delay, you can see half beats. The feedback is low, just similar to the time on the reverb. The width is a bit lower because I've turned on the double switch, so we get natural ping pong in. So I've just reduced the width a little bit more. Then the low cut is just getting rid of everything that doesn't need to be in the low portion. I don't want to hear any delay in the lower frequencies. And then the higher frequencies, I've just dialed them in. You could see very precisely to the point where you could just about hear it, but it wasn't making the rest of the sound mushy and acting like a filter. And then the dry wet pulled back, then we can hear just enough for that to blend into the sound. And don't forget, delay is optional, so you don't have to do this stage if you don't want to. So we've got the basis of our sound. I'm going to pull that frequency back down to about 2, and then I'm just going to dial in the envelope and mount. So for me, a little bit too much mid-range coming through, and to save having to do third-party editing like using an EQ to sort of tweak that up, I'm going to use the 4-pole. So the nature and the sound of 4-pole is going to make it naturally sound a little bit deeper and just a little bit more resonant on some of the lower frequencies. So you can hear the 4-pole just helps the decay sort of shift a little bit quicker into the lower sort of rumbly, more weight side of the sound, and that is why I'm using that. So with that, I just want to show you 2 more things, and that is 1, turning on the VCA saturation, just gives it a lovely sort of like blanket texture over the top and just increases the harmonic content. Finally, just so we have a little bit more control over this is optional, but I like to do it with this particular one, is to set 2 more constant values here because we're using 2 oscillators in this instance. And I'm going to use oscillator 1 phase for the first and oscillator 2 phase for the second. The second one I'm not too fussed about because we can't hear it too much, but I am going to dial it in. And then the first one I am, because I want to hear a little bit of snap out of the sound instead of it being so rounded on the front end. The best way that I'm going to describe this to you, when I start dialing this dial to the right, you're going to hear a little bit more. And the best way to describe this to you is the dial, when I turn this on the oscillator 1 phase, more so because we can hear this more, you're going to hear more snap come out. You're going to see we're going to sort of shift through softness and sharpness of the sound because we're picking where we want to start on the waveform instead of the synth randomly picking on that waveform. So if we just jump to the front, you can see if I upped the attack, we're going to get a softer sound. And lower the attack, we're going to get a snappier sound. So I'm going to turn off the chorus so we can hear this a little bit better. So you can see if we dial it to about 3 o'clock, we're getting a lot sharper transient on the front end because it's starting at a different point in the waveform. That's just got a little bit more click and pop to the sound. The second one, we're not really too bothered about, but I'm just going to dial it in anyway. I want to make it a little bit smoother. Sorry, wrong one. We need to dial in oscillator 2 and turn 1 off. So it goes a little bit soft at that point. I'm happy with that. We can turn around, turn oscillator 1 off, remove that one and put it back to the half LED. And that just gives a guaranteed starting position on your phase for your waveform, so you get a consistency in your bass. Now, just as a side note before we finish this up, if you was wanting to use the Unison engine, then you're going to have to activate all the voices here at the bottom to utilize the voices. And you're going to also probably have to remove the starting phase positions so you get a more sort of free-flowing sound. You want those random phase positions to sort of bring all them voices together without sounding too close together and snappy. So what I'll do is I'll save that patch for you, and then if you want to download the second one where I'm just going to quickly show you how to use the Unison, then you can also follow along with that bit as well. Okay, so let's have a look at the Unison engine for just the optional part, but you can download this preset as well if you like. So I'm going to blend the Unison engine with the chorus that we used in the effects. So first of all, I'm going to turn off the chorus. In fact, let's just turn the effects off entirely and listen to how this sounds off and on. It sounds exactly the same, and that's because we're limiting the voices down here for a start. So I'm going to open all of these voices up. Now we can hear we've got multiple voices. So you could just have 2, 3, 4, depends on what you want. So I'm going to go for 6. And we can obviously shift these voices around using the oscillator to detune. So I sort of like that position. Let's open the filter so we can hear the effect. So I'm going to go for about there. And you can hear we've got a little bit too much snap on there. So for now, I'm going to remove the constant values here. So it doesn't matter that these are here and set. They're not attached to anything, so they don't affect the sound design now. So now you can hear they pick a random section in the phase. So I'm going to dial in around 2 on the detune there. And then when we bring that filter back down, we're going to have to go a little bit further because we've got more voices here. So I'm going to bring that further down. And I might even limit this to 3. And then when we put the effects back on, including our chorus, sounds quite nice. Let's increase the voices again to 6. So what I'm going to do with this is just shave the front of the attack off this one, just so we can control the transient of the sound. So there's too much attack there. And there we have it. You have 2 brand new bass presets. Hopefully that's opened up some avenues to understanding how we can create basses using the chorus instead of the Unison engine, and then sort of blending the 2 together to create a unique patch. And you could hear that Obsession just creates that grittiness straight off the offset, and that VCA saturation really sort of finished the deal for me when I was designing sounds initially for the tutorials. So thank you very much for watching. I've been Demis Helen, and I will look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Take care.